What's going on, guys? Hope you guys are having a great day today. So in part one, we've already learned how to flatten any sort of multi-dimensional array. We've flattened that recursively, and we also flattened that iteratively. In this video, we're going to be taking what we've learned in part one and applying it to part two, but instead of applying it to arrays, we're going to be flattening objects. And once we learn how to flatten objects, I will be creating a part three of this video, which combines what we learned in part one, flattening arrays, and then part two, flattening objects. Part three will entail how to flatten any sort of input. It can be an array with objects, or the opposite, an object with arrays. So if you find this video helpful, please consider pressing the like button below or subscribing, as it might not seem like a big deal to you, but it means the whole world to me as I'm just starting off. I also do want to mention that I do have a website called frontendlead.com where we're going to have over 75 different front-end engineering interview questions that are generally asked by top tech companies, and 10 plus system design and 10 plus app design related questions. So if you're currently studying for interviews, check out frontendlead.com. So with that, let's get started. So let's take a look at this input. This is an input that's a multi-dimensional object. The object can have its own set of objects, and those can have their own objects, and that can go on forever. And the values for each of the keys are generally going to be a primitive. So when we flatten out the object, our expected output would be to preserve the keys and the values from the order that we saw them from top to bottom, and make sure there's no more sub-objects left. So let's build this out. So say function flatten object, and we'll be taking an input, and because this flatten object is going to be called recursively, we need a base case here. So we'll say if type of input does not equal to object. So we basically are checking as long as these are primitive values, null values, or undefined values. So the only problem here is that technically in JavaScript, inputs are also technically considered null values, and that will be excluded here because we're explicitly excluding out objects. So we want to specify null values are okay. So we'll say or input equals null, then we return input. So again, we're checking if it's not an object, or the input is null, return the input itself. Now let's get into the actual flattening part of things. So we'll define a mutatable variable here called flattened, which is just going to be an empty object. And after we flatten things out, we'll just return that at the end. So we'll say return flattened. And now we want to iterate through our input, which is an object. So we'll say for const key in input. We want to grab the values from the object itself. So we'll define a new variable called const val equals to input key. And this is where we want to call our recursive flatten object function. So we'll say const flat val equals to flatten object val. Now that we have our flat value, again, we want to check if the type of flat value is an object. So we'll say if type of flat val equals to an object, and again we want to exclude null values, so we'll say and flat val does not equal to null. Now if this statement returns true, then we want to actually update our initial flattened variable object. So we'll say flattened equals, and we're overriding flattened to actually equal to the values of itself. So we'll use the spread operator to extract the inner values. So we'll say flattened. And now we'll merge this with the flat value object that's returned from flat val. This will help us preserve our key value pairs. So else, so now we're not an object anymore. We want to grab the flat values and push them into our flattened object. But we want to push them based off of the key that came in. So we'll say flattened key equals to flat val. And that's pretty much it. Now we can try running this. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to do a console.log flatten object input. And input is already defined as a variable with the multidimensional object. So if I run this, we should expect it to match our expected output. So we get A, C, D, G, H, I as expected. And we flattened this nested object. If you guys found this video helpful, please consider pressing the like button below and subscribing, leaving a comment as well. Hope you guys have a great day. Thanks.